Good afternoon, live from Toronto on the GBKM network. This is the Chat Up Show, the show where we chat about any and everything to do with popular culture. I'm your host, Elizabeth Floyd, and I hope that you are ready to chat it up with me today. Now, as always, you can keep up with the GBKM network in various ways. You can listen live 24/7 at www.gbkm.fm. You can watch, like, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff on Facebook and YouTube at GBKM TV. You can follow us on Instagram at GBKM.FM and Twitter at GBKM_FM. Now, Labor Day is just around the corner, and I'm not really sure where summer went. It was here for a minute, and then it's going slowly but surely. But this summer has been a pretty busy summer for some of us. While a lot of us have been confined to our own safe spaces and small groups, not a lot to do. We haven't been able to go to our concerts as much as we'd like to, even travel. Just not a lot of the same summer activities we were able to do last year, if you will. Here in Toronto, we didn't have Caravana this year, which really hurt quite a few of us out here in Toronto. We missed the Caravana feeling in the city this year, but I wouldn't call this summer completely uneventful. I wouldn't even call this year completely uneventful. I mean, so much has happened already, and we've gone through that previous times on the show, going through all of the events that started from January 1st up until this very point. There's been a lot. There's been a lot to digest, a lot to get through, a lot to deal with, a lot of changes that we're still slowly getting used to. I know there are times that I forget to leave the house with a mask and have to run right back up because there's nowhere I can go without a mask these days. Things that we're slowly becoming more accustomed to, just changes all around, really. But there's something that has been consistent for at least the last 3 months. And yes, I'm talking about the protests that are happening in the country that is just south of us right here in Canada, in the United States. Now, we did see some protests spring up across the world as well, in solidarity and in the name of seeking justice, especially for Black lives and Black bodies around the world. But ones that have really taken all headlines are the protests going on in the United States right now. Now, let's look back at the essentially 3 major reasons we saw and are still seeing protests happen till this very day. Now, in February, remember the case of Ahmaud Arbery, who was murdered by 2 men, Travis and Gregory McMichael, and there was a third man, William Bryan, who recorded the video of the murder. This happened in Georgia, in the United States. This happened again in February, just to remind you, and they weren't arrested until about May. That's 3 months after the fact. Now, we saw protests that ensued not only to charge the suspects, but also to open investigations on who helped keep this case so well hidden for the last 3 months, that it took 3 months for arrests to finally be made when there was video evidence available. Now, this is just conversations that have been happening regarding this specific case, as felt that 3 months was far too long to have an arrest made when there is video evidence happening, but it is moving towards trial. All 3 of the men have been charged and going to trial. Now, another case, Breonna Taylor's death, which happened in March, which also didn't gain as much national recognition as it had in its early days as it had after a while, let's just say, and after another death that really sparked a lot of conversation, especially in the States, but also all over the world, and that was the murder of George Floyd. We saw that in May when the video came out showing the 8 minutes and 46 seconds of his life being taken in the middle of the streets, essentially. And that really sparked a lot of outrage, as I said, not just in the United States, but across the world, which then also inspired more protests to happen. Now, this also opened up conversations regarding the history of police brutality in the United States, the history of violence against Black bodies, even present violence against Black bodies, not just in the United States, but also across the world. Now, it's stories like the story of 23-year-old Elijah McClain, who was killed last year. Most of us didn't hear about that story until this year. took about a year to have that investigation reopened for his case. It took a lot of petitions signed, took a lot of noise to be made, but those stories didn't really get the recognition that, as some would believe, deserved, because we hadn't heard of those protests until this year, when the whole country was already in protest, and it really created the platform for us to be earnest and have these conversations regarding race in all aspects, from media conversations to even just day-to-day life, traveling around the world in bodies that we didn't choose, but for some reason give us different outlooks and experiences in life. Also started conversations about the history around the world of anti-Blackness and statues that are still up, or were still up at least in some cases, that really represented that idea and those ideals in some way. Some of those statues we saw come down. As I've mentioned on this show previously, there was a statue in Belgium of King Leopold III that came down. Christopher Columbus statues are coming down. Even statues in England were being brought down, or petitioned to be brought down, because of the history surrounding them. So this has been, as I said, not an uneventful summer. There's been a lot of conversation, we'll say, that's been happening. There's a lot of talking and a lot of being open and honest, and a lot of unlearning and learning, relearning, if you will, of different histories, and just learning of other people's experiences, learning of the privileges some of us walk around with that allow us to not have to face certain injustices in this world. A lot of conversation that's been happening, and to sit here on this show and kind of skid past it would feel almost disingenuous for me, especially, just because this is the show that's about, yes, talking about pop culture, but what that means is popular culture, things that are hot topics right now, things that are topics of importance, things that really get us thinking about how we see the world around us, and how maybe the actions we are committing have an effect on the world around us. Thinking about those things. Now, pop culture isn't just about entertainment news. It's not just about the fun, the light stuff. This is real life things that happen to people across the world as well. And it's important that we discuss these issues so that we know not to make and continue to make the same mistakes that we're seeing now. After all, we learn history so that history doesn't repeat itself. But what are we doing if we're just allowing us to talk about history without actually actively making those changes? Now, that's something that has been a hot topic of late, especially looking at how the world needs to change, how it already is changing, not just because of the pandemic, but because of these conversations that are happening. That change must occur. We need to see that change happen. If not now, very soon. Now, there's a new story that's propped up that shows that not a lot of change really has happened, and that's the story of Jacob Blake Jr. Now, before we dive into what happened to Jacob Blake, here's a quick video that I want us to really just take in for a minute.
I am my brother's keeper. And when you say the name Jacob Blake, make sure you say father, make sure you say cousin, make sure you say son, make sure you say uncle, but most importantly, make sure you say human. Human life. Let it marinate in your mouth, in your minds. A human life. Just like every single one of y'all and everywhere around the world. We're human. And his life matters. So many people have reached out to me telling me they're sorry that this happened to my family. Well, don't be sorry, because this has been happening to my family for a long time. Longer than I can account for. It happened to Emmett Till. Emmett Till is my family. Philando, Mike Brown, Sandra. This has been happening to my family. And I've shared tears for every single one of these people that it's happened to. This is nothing new. I'm not sad. I'm not sorry. I'm angry. And I'm tired. I haven't cried one time. I stopped crying years ago. I am numb. I have been watching police murder people that look like me for years. I'm also a Black History minor. So not only have I been watching it in the 30 years that I've been on this planet, but I've been watching it for years before we were even alive. I'm not sad. I don't want your pity. I want change. I am.
Now, those are the words of LaTetra Widman, who is Jacob Blake's sister, as she addressed the media and the public on Tuesday regarding her brother's condition. Now, just a little bit about the situation right now. Jacob Blake was shot on Sunday by police officers, reportedly 7 times, is now in hospital, has had surgery. Now, these words from his sister are not new. I personally have heard them time and time again, especially this summer, this quote-unquote uneventful summer that we've been having. Her words, "I'm not sad, I'm not sorry, I'm angry, and I'm tired," are words that have been echoed by others in the Black community as well, especially knowing that it's been 3 months of protesting, and yet not all cases have found justice. It's been 3 months of having these conversations, and yet it seems that we continue to repeat the same cycles we've been seeing before. Now, Widman's words echoed for a lot of people in their hearts. They felt these words personally, but also they're so powerful because they speak to just how almost this is a family who just recently went through this. And his sister's standing up there saying that she hasn't even cried for her brother. That this is past tears at this moment. It's past tears. It's past crying out in the street. That something needs to happen and there needs to be a change. A change, she says, "I stopped crying years ago. I'm numb. We have been watching police kill Black people for years." Adding, "I don't want your pity, I want change." Powerful, powerful words. Now, my thoughts and prayers do go out to Jacob Blake, his sons who witnessed the shooting as well, his family and all those affected by this news, because it's not easy hearing this again and thinking another person's whose life was put in jeopardy by the very people who are to serve and protect. Now, for those who are wondering why this woman is speaking and who and what happened with Jacob Blake, here's what's going on. So on Sunday evening, there was footage of an unarmed 29-year-old Jacob Blake being shot in the back about 8 times by Kenosha, Wisconsin police that was posted on Facebook. And that video, of course, went viral. Now, reports and witnesses say police were responding to a domestic dispute, which Blake had reportedly not been involved in. And before he was shot in front of his 3 sons, trying to enter his gray SUV, he had been trying to diffuse the dispute. A male witness actually told a local TV station that Blake wasn't armed or aggressive when he tried to break up the fight between 2 women before he was shot on the 40th Street around 5 p.m. on Sunday. Now, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers condemned the excessive use of force in front of Blake's kids, mind you, and amid the demands that the officers be brought to justice. He said that this was not the right way to go about things, and it was excessive use of force. Now, in an emotional video posted to his Instagram stories, Jacob Blake Sr., who is Jacob Blake's father, said there was no justification for the horrific shooting after confirming his son was, in fact, alive and stable. So this isn't another story of another Black man who was killed by the police. He's actually managed to survive the surgery so far, is still in hospital recovering from his wounds. Now, on Monday, Blake was in surgery. This was reported by his attorney, Ben Crump, adding that the bullets had severed Blake's spinal cord and shattered his vertebrae. He said that it's, quote, going to take a miracle for Jacob Blake Jr. to ever walk again. Now, his legal team does plan to file a civil lawsuit against the police department over the shooting. And police have, of course, said little about what happened other than that they were responding to a domestic dispute. Now, the officers who were involved have not been named yet, and the Wisconsin Department of Justice is investigating. Now, this story is especially especially harrowing, as it reminds us of Philando Castile, who was shot with his daughter in the car. This time, it's Blake's 3 younger sons who were aged 3, 5, and 8 in the car at the time of the shooting. And according to his lawyer, it was the 8-year-old's birthday. Now, in the video that you just saw of LaTetra Windman giving her speech, she says that if you mention his name, mention that he is a father, a brother, a uncle, a human. A human who was shot by police in front of his 3 sons. Now, presidential candidate Joe Biden has called for an immediate investigation into the shooting, saying his children watched from inside the car and bystanders watched in belief, he said in a statement. And this morning, the nation wakes up yet again with grief and outrage that yet another Black American is a victim of excessive force. This calls for an immediate, full, and transparent investigation, and the officers must be held accountable. Now, this is from presidential candidate Joe Biden. Now, the Wisconsin Division of Criminal Investigation will investigate the shooting and take the findings to District Attorney Michael D. Gravely, just to give you an idea of what's going on regarding that investigation. Now, while the officers who were involved have been placed on administrative leave, we still don't know their names, but the department does say that they have been placed under administrative leave. Now, Mr. Blake is also being represented by lawyer, as I said, Ben Crump, who is also spearheading the George Floyd case, which we know was the major event that sparked a lot of the widespread protest we've seen before. Same lawyer as well, working on this case. Just another idea that it's another person whose life has been severely altered by the police. Now, DA Gravely has said the investigation is still in its earliest stages. I mean, this did just happen on Sunday. And several dozen people have gathered on Monday to protest for Jacob Blake after he was shot by police on Sunday. So it is early days for the investigation. They say there is an investigation going on, but this hasn't stopped any protests from happening, just to ensure that swift justice is served. Now, United Action Oshkosh, which is a local grassroots group, organized a protest after seeing what happened to Blake. And Dan Pratt, who is a leader at United Action, said that Jake Blake was attacked by the police, and I was indignant when I saw that, like a lot of our community members. We saw the injustice and we felt the need to protest. Now, the organization is actually demanding community oversight of the police by establishing a Civilian Police Accountability Council, known by the abbreviation CPAC. Now, this is something that has been brought up in conversation about who is holding the police accountable for their actions. Normally, it's done in-house. But now, as you know, we're having calls of defunding the police start up again or continuing. We're hearing more and more about the ways we can defund and reallocate funds to other community initiatives, community building initiatives as well. In this particular area, in this space, they are asking for a civilian-ran, accountability council for the police as well, to really hold them accountable for their actions so things like this don't happen again. Now, this organization is a group of citizens that would review the allegations of police misconduct independent of law enforcement, according to Pratt. So that this would be a group of people who aren't part of the police departments and can then, hold those who need to be held accountable. Now, the community members have been talking about establishing a CPAC since Oshkosh police officer Aaron Atchberg shot and killed Isaiah Tucker, who was a 28-year-old Black man in 2017. So this has been in conversation for 3 years at this point, as there were no charges that were filed in that shooting. So Pratt has said that this is something that they've been thinking about since then, because clearly something needs to be done. As Widman says, no pity. Change needs to happen. There needs to be change. And so if the community wants to take that into their own hands and start something that will effect change and hopefully start to create maybe a domino effect of change across the country, hopefully, as we're seeing that nothing is really stopping police officers from doing a lot of what they've been doing and continue to do, even during protests while people are exercising their amendment rights to peacefully protest. They have seen some brutality. I mean, in New York, you saw NYPD officers use an SUV to run down protesters on video for the world to see. There was another video of two Buffalo police officers push down a 75-year-old on video again after the video footage came out after they'd actually kind of fudged the report about what had happened, saying that the 75-year-old man had approached them aggressively. Video proved otherwise. So even while we know that they are being filmed and they are being held accountable by this video footage, we're not seeing as much change as we'd like. We're not seeing much change in the behavior, knowing that the whole world is watching. So in this particular county, they're hoping that if there is a civilian group put together that holds them accountable, holds police accountable for their misconduct, then maybe they will start seeing the change that needs to happen. Now, these mass protests started 3 months after the murder of, 3 months after the murder of George Floyd, which we know sparked a lot of the protests around the United States. The only difference with Blake Jr. is that he took 7 to 8 shots and survived in this case. Apparently, in a video of the incidents, you can hear officers shout, "Drop the knife," as Blake Jr. tries to get to his car. But according to the man who made the video of the shooting, 22-year-old Rayshawn White, he said that Blake was scuffling with 3 officers and he heard them yell, drop the knife," before the gunfires erupted. But he said that he didn't see a knife in Blake's hands. Now, as I mentioned, Blake did survive and was awake and talking to his mother on Monday, worried that he wouldn't be able to walk again, wanting to see his sons again, saying that he was sorry for the burden he's put on his family now. That's where his head was at. But his case is different because he did manage to survive. It's not the case for a lot of people. So hopefully that means that he'll be able to fight for justice himself and seek justice himself. He'll be able to tell his story and his side of events. His mother, Julia Jackson, also said that he said, "I don't want to be a burden on you guys. I want to be with my children, and I don't think I'll walk again." His life, his family's lives will forever be altered by this split-second decision made by some officers on the scene. If he's unable to walk again, as his lawyer said, it would be a miracle for him to walk again. It was a miracle that he was able to survive those close-range shots to begin with. But it would be a miracle for him to walk again. His life has changed completely. Now, of course, there have been some protests, as I said, and of some rioting as well, as some cars and buildings have been burned in the area, which has again sparked the conversation around what seeking justice should look like when folks are feeling angry and unheard. And we know back in May, when protests first began, there was a quote that was used a lot, and this was the Martin Luther King Jr. quote. But I want to give more than what was being said. It was essentially that rioting is the voice of the unheard. But here's a longer version of this quote here. "And I must say tonight that a riot is the language of the unheard. And what is it America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice and humanity." Now, these are words that he has been quoted to have uttered from as early as 1966, and still today they ring some truth. That people would much rather see some orderly, disorderly conduct, if you will, if that's what you want to call it. That they just want to hear you protest maybe with a hashtag or just on social media, but not actually take it to the streets. That when you start to create some kind of inconvenience in everyone's everyday life, that's it. No one should pay attention to what the reason is behind these actions. It seems it's easier to focus on the rioting than it is the reason why people are reacting the way they are. That folks are feeling unheard, that they are angry, that they are tired, to reiterate the words of LaTetra Woodman, that they don't want pity anymore. They want change. And if you're not going to hear us every other way, then maybe this is the way you're going to hear. Now, this isn't condoning any of the actions some people have taken into their hands to go about, and may not be for the cause, may not be for the reason that others are out there peacefully protesting. But if you're wondering why folks are still protesting 3 months after George Floyd's death, up to 5 months after even Breonna Taylor's death, it's because they haven't seen the change that they want. They haven't seen the change that they feel is necessary to really bring about justice and equity. Now, First Lady Melania Trump made a statement regarding these events of the last 3 months during her Republican convention speech. She says, and I quote, she's asking people to stop the violence and looting being done in the name of justice, and to never make assumptions based on the color of a person's skin. Now, these were the words from First Lady Melania Trump, and that's fair. You don't want to see violence being used in the name of justice, and you don't want to see people making assumptions based on the color of a person's skin, but we are seeing that happen. Now, these are somewhat echoing the statements of Blake's mother, who also says that she doesn't believe that seeking justice for her son should go the rioting way. But in some cases, it's the only way to bring about change. And hopefully, Jacob Blake will be able to speak his story, and we can hear it straight from him what happened and what was really going on in that situation. But that's not the same for a lot of other people. And on that note, we will take a quick commercial break. And when we're back, we'll keep discussing what it's like for those who haven't seen justice till this day. Stay tuned.
Do you know who you are? What is your name?
Sometimes you wonder why and wonder how. Don't be alone. Just stay calm, cause even if you choose or not to.
My child, recite the words of this ancient mythology. The wisdom I disperse in this verse, no apology. Memorize to keep you from evil theology. For you, the dark Kahiyah denied your equality. See, for generations we perpetrated psychology. Divide and conquer each other, really lynch policy. You cannot build each other up, how will you build economy?
Hello and welcome back to the Chat Up Show with me, your host, Elizabeth Eloidy. Now, before the show, we were discussing the events that occurred on Sunday evening in terms of the shooting of Jacob Blake Jr. Now, he is alive and has come out of surgery, and he was able to talk with his family on Monday night, as has been reported. But that's not the case for a lot of victims of police brutality. And in the case of Breonna Taylor, there are still protests being held in her name, seeking justice for her death that happened March 13th, when 3 officers entered her apartment she shared with her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, while she was asleep on a no-knock warrant. And that led to Breonna Taylor's death and 1 officer's injuries. It's been 5 months, or more specifically, it's been 166 days since her death. It has been approximately 89 days of protesting. And so far, only 1 of the officers involved have been fired. Now, a lot of people feel that that's not enough, and that justice needs to be served, and that her death was not in vain. And though there was a new law passed in her name to ban no-knock warrants in Louisville, the Breonna Law, as it's been coined and reported as, her name has garnered a lot of publicity, and we can't deny that. A lot of people are hearing the name Breonna Taylor. A lot of people are seeing the name Breonna Taylor. People are using her name to fight for justice for her life, and in as many ways as possible to continue the conversation. To continue the conversation of what happened, to continue the conversation of why change needs to occur. Now, the way people are doing this has been up for debate for a while because, it's important that we do fight for justice whenever we can, in whichever way we can. For some, it's donating monetarily. For others, it's donating time. For others, it's just sharing resources. But for some, it's turned into something different. Now there are t-shirts that are made in honor of seeking justice. Images of her have graced the covers of Oprah magazine and recently Vanity Fair. But there's mixed feelings on this kind of coverage and the reception of this kind of coverage. Her mother, Tamika Palma, has been interviewed for both of the features and for various outlets, sharing the life that was taken shortly after midnight on March 13th, sharing the person she was, sharing what Breonna's hopes and dreams were for her future, for the world's future. People have gone back to reshare some of her old tweets as well, in a way to keep her legacy alive and to keep her voice alive. Now, there are mixed feelings about her images being used for magazine covers, most of which have been shared on social media. Now, on the one hand, folks feel like this is the best way to keep her legacy alive and to continue fighting for justice for her life. For example, the artist of the Vanity Fair cover, Amy Sherald, told Vanity Fair that, quote, "I made this portrait for her family. I mean, of course, I made it for Vanity Fair, but the whole time I was thinking about her family." Now, Amy Sherald is also the same artist who did the infamous Michelle Obama portrait of her in that white gown that hangs in the National Gallery. Now, Sherald also said that producing this image keeps Breonna alive forever. Now, of course, this image was to pay homage to her and also part of the issue, speaking of what change needs to occur. This is a September issue of Vanity Fair. And another image painted by another African-American artist also graced the cover of Oprah magazine too. And that was also an effort to talk about what change needs to happen, talk about racism in America, talk about white privilege even in also the September issue. These images, of course, for the cover were commissioned, but then there are also others who are using others' images on t-shirts and using hashtags, arrest the cops that killed Breonna Taylor, for anything that's posted on social media now, that folks have felt that it's turned into almost a meme, that her life has turned into a meme, that her murder has turned into a meme, that her murder has turned into another way for other people to get viral. Some who echo this sentiment is writer Legacy Russell, who tweeted that the aestheticization of Breonna Taylor is unacceptable. It is not radical to make her image decorative. There is a complex art/history regarding decorative concealing violence. Are beautiful images dignity or justice? Is her family being compensated for the use of her image? Now, Legacy Russell tweeted this the same day that Vanity Fair revealed the cover. And though it is important in the fight for her justice that her story is shared and remembered. I mean, we heard in the Vanity Fair issue, or the Vanity Fair feature, her mother, Palmer, telling us about who Breonna was and about her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker's plans on proposing to Breonna. Even had photographs of the ring that he was planning to propose with. Hearing the story about the human behind the story, the human, the woman that was Breonna Taylor, and the fact that she also had dreams that she was aspiring to be. She was an EMT working during the pandemic. We hear this a lot. We hear these stories. We see her pictures. Hopefully remember her name. Hopefully remember what happened. And that's all well and good, because that is fighting towards the cause. It's fighting for the cause in some way, right? It's trying to continue the conversation, trying to keep her in people's memories, keep her in the memories of folks who can really bring about the change that protesters even are looking for. But I'm not talking about that side of things. I'm talking about the t-shirts that say hashtag arrest the cops that killed Breonna Taylor that are being sold. Now, there are some places that are donating some of the funds and profits made off of these images and off of these products and merchandise. But how many can we say that are truly, truly going towards the family's legal fees, or even organizations that will help the family's legal fees, or help the family seek justice for their daughter, their sister, their friend, their girlfriend, their cousin? It's understandable why people would feel that her death is becoming more decorative than it is actually to fight for justice, that she still needs justice to be sought after for her. That though it's been investigated, it's 5 months now. It's taking 5 months. So the question of, are these actually helping or hindering the case? They may not necessarily be doing anything bad or to stop her case from being investigated, but maybe it doesn't feel as real to a lot of people anymore. That this was a life lost. But now because you see the images everywhere, you start to become desensitized to how she lost her life, why she lost her life, or whether there will be justice served for her life. Now, with these September issues, it may be a way to humanize, as I said, the person behind these stories that we've been seeing and hearing. And whether they bring about real change or not, only time will tell. We can't say that for now. We can't sit here and say there's no way these issues will actually bring about justice or bring about any change. Maybe it will allow for a wider audience to hear of her story, to hear about Breonna Taylor, and to feel something and feel more inclined to join the fight for justice. Maybe that's what they're doing. But then there's also the other side where it feels as though this is just a moment that people feel will pass. Like the black squares, for example, where people posted those black squares for Blackout Tuesday in June, and that was it. That was the only thing that they contributed to the conversation, at least. Many people fear that this will stop the process of justice, as people will become too desensitized to this idea. It's the same as how people feel that posting videos of this police brutality constantly on social media is stopping us from really feeling empathy and compassion towards it. That it just becomes another video in the sea of videos. It becomes another name in the sea of names. Which is why it is important to say their names. Say her name, Breonna Taylor. Say his name, George Floyd. Say her name, Sandra Bland. Saying these names, reminding people of why we're saying these names and what it's for, may keep the memory fresh, may remind people what it is, what the justice is that folks are protesting and have been protesting for. For 89 days, people have been in the streets seeking justice. This isn't just a moment. Maybe it will be in the grand scheme of things in history. But this isn't just something that's on social media. This is happening in the real world, in real time. People are literally out there fighting for justice and fighting for justice for Breonna as well. And it seems that folks are forgetting that. The protests are still happening. And for so long, we weren't talking about rioting because they were, for the most part, peaceful protests. People conducting sit-ins. And yet, the police are still finding ways to be violent. For example, Elijah McClain, who was killed in a chokehold last August in 2019, his story didn't get as much recognition until this year when the protests started erupting and people were having these conversations and digging into history in the past of certain areas, police departments, and their misconduct. That we heard about the story of Elijah. Not only killed by chokehold, but also sedation by paramedics as well, allegedly. And then when his protesters and even loved ones wanted to hold a peaceful memorial for him in the park by playing violins, as he was also a violinist, police showed up in riot gear, telling everyone to shut it down, to go home. Maybe they didn't have their permits, but it's a peaceful protest at the end of the day. Why is it being met by an army of police in riot gear? They are exercising their rights, after all. So for those who keep forgetting why people are still out in those streets, it's for this very reason. That there's no justification for the way things have turned out, for this course of action, for someone to be shot 7 times while walking away from the situation. That these are just reminders that we need to refocus and recenter ourselves and focus on what the real issue is, what the real problem is. The people are losing their lives over things that they have no business losing their lives of. Whether they are guilty of crimes that they are supposedly committing or not should not mean they should lose their life? Shouldn't they go through the justice system? Don't they have the right to do that? It's not the police's job to decide if somebody is guilty and take matters into their own hands, especially when they aren't posing an imminent threat. That is why LaTetra Windman's words hit home for so many, that this isn't the first time. This isn't the second, this isn't even the third. One too many times is what it is. And if things don't change now, they're gonna have to change sooner or later. Now, this history or series of events is also why rapper Meg Thee Stallion says she was quick to defend her alleged shooter, Tory Lanez. In the shooting that occurred last month, it was reported that Megan Thee Stallion had cut her foot supposedly on some shattered glass, when police were also responding to the calls of shots fired. Now, last week, Meg finally broke her silence on the incident in an Instagram live video, publicly calling out the Canadian hip-hop artist, saying that he was the one that shot her in the back of the foot. She then also posted some graphic images of her injuries on her social media, which she eventually deleted. But of course, that was after everyone had already picked it up and screenshotted it, showing just what the injury looked like and the bullet wounds. Now, in her initial report, she didn't mention Tory shooting her, which she addressed in the live video, saying, quote, "You think I'm about to tell police that we, us, black people, have a gun in the car? You want me to tell the law that we have a gun in the car so that they can shoot all of us up?" So the reason she didn't mention that was because she didn't want to have things go the way she's seen it happen before with the police. Now, of course, this caused a lot of confusion for many regarding the case, but Meg felt the need to break the silence because, as she alleges in her live, that Tory Lanez's team had been lying to the blogs, saying, and I quote, "And you've got your publicists and your people going to these blogs lying. Stop lying. Why lie? I don't understand." Now, of course, folks are saying, then why did you lie originally? Which she then, of course, addressed was because she was scared of how the situation may have turned if the cops had known that there was a gun at the scene at some point. Now, of course, these are all allegations that she has put out. We do not really know what has really happened so far. It's still under investigation, of course, so these are all still allegations. We know that he is a suspect in the case according to the police report. The events that occurred are different on the police report than what Meg is saying now, and the events reported in the media are different as well, which, according to Meg, was because Tory Lanez's publicists and his team had put out these false stories. But just back to the point that she felt that she needed to essentially cover up the person that had allegedly put her in harm's way, because she didn't want to put them in harm's way because of the history of police again and brutality against black bodies. That's just showing where her head's at and where she's thinking. And this sparked a lot of conversation around the safety of black women and who was protecting them, that Meg felt so inclined to protect the very person who had allegedly hurt her, but they weren't protecting her when they had put her in harm's way by allegedly shooting at her. Now, rather than see what could have occurred that night had she told the cops the truth, she felt that it was wrong of her, or if she felt that it was unsafe for her to advocate for herself, to stand up for herself in that very moment and say what had happened to her. But now, having seen all the reports that have come out, having seen how the media has treated the incident, there were a lot of jokes and memes put out there, let me tell you. In fact, there was a moment that another, influencer / celebrity had come out and said that that's another level of love that she's never experienced, and she wonders what it would feel like if she knew a man loved her so much that he would allegedly shoot her. Of course, that's caused a lot of controversy as well, but this is just an example of the way people were treating the incident. It was almost as if it was a joking matter, that it wasn't serious and almost unbelievable. But now that Meg, of course, has come out and said her side of things, she has garnered a lot of support, especially from other women in the industry, one of which was JoJo, a musician and artist who removed Tory Lanez from her deluxe version of her album. And she felt no ways about letting fans know about it, tweeting, "I def took him off." Also showing her support is Kalani, who is close friends with Megan, saying that the decision to remove Tory Lanez from her album was in loyalty with her friend. And I quote, "As someone with a large platform, as someone that people look up to, as a woman that makes other women feel safe and empowered, people were asking me, are you going to keep somebody on who doesn't necessarily make us feel safe or empowered as a woman?" Kalani said. She then went on to say that this situation was involving someone that I'm extremely close to. So I just felt like on some loyal and on some do the right thing, you have to be responsible. Absolutely, I'm changing up the record. It was a business and it was a loyalty to a situation. This is not an industry friendship. That's really my friend and someone I say I love you to, Kalani said. Now, this is considered a high-profile case, considering it's both Megan and Tory, who are celebrities. So normally we think that justice will be served swiftly, but that's not always the case, as we know, that justice isn't always served swiftly for certain situations and for certain people. And though the circumstances do differ, Ahmaud Arbery's case took 3 months to see arrests made. Despite that, even Meg felt uncomfortable turning to the police in her time of need because she had seen situations like Ahmaud Arbery's, Breonna Taylor's case as well, and just how police have treated Black men especially in the past, which is why she felt that she couldn't speak up in the moment. Now, some argue that her not wanting to speak up and not wanting to hear about Meg's situation, not even wanting to watch videos of police brutality, is because of the over-sensationalization of these situations in the media that often occur. That it becomes more than it needs to be, it becomes something that it isn't, and we tend to forget the reason why people are having the conversations to begin with, which is what I mentioned before. We tend to forget why people are even out there protesting, because sometimes we would rather focus on the rioting that happens for the short period of time than on the fact that for 89 days people have been in the streets just marching, chanting, not inciting any violence or riots, up until recently, of course, but for the most part have been peaceful protests. Sometimes we also, as the media, have to hold ourselves accountable in how we contribute to the over-sensationalization of these stories, and how we contribute to the fact that sometimes these stories aren't taken as seriously as they should be. In the case of Meg, I saw a lot of blogs treat it as a joke, turn it into a meme, post the funny tweets that people were posting about the fact that someone was literally shot and injured, in some way had to get surgery, had to go to hospital, and yet we've still found ways to joke about it. Maybe it's because we're becoming too desensitized to violence against people in certain communities, or maybe it's because we're becoming just desensitized in general, that social media has allowed us to have that window up, where that window up is what we'll call it, that keeps us separate from others, keeps us separate from the people we are talking about, the people we are discussing. At the end of the day, these are real lives, and though their images may grace the covers of magazines, still a real life, a human, a person. Though we may just hear of their names, we may see them in a hashtag, may see them in music videos, listen to their music, support them as much as we do. These are still human beings that things happen to. They're not just images, they're not just figments of our imagination, that they're real people. And there are real reasons that people are out here seeking justice. That lives have been lost at the hands of people they shouldn't have been taking lives, which is why people are protesting. So let's remember that before we cast judgment on folks who are angry or tired, like Latetra Widman, who has not cried for a brother. Before we just throw around pity, let's look at what we can do to make those changes. Let's look at how we can contribute to a change that we want to see in the world. that things can't continue this way. Yes, you're right, things cannot continue this way. We can't keep seeing these protests that occasionally have some rioting occurring, but for the most part, peaceful protests happening, and not see some kind of change. So if you're sitting at home thinking, why are they back in the streets again? Why are they doing this? Ask yourself, what justifies a police officer taking someone's life? What justifies it to you? Because we've heard of instances where someone did pose an imminent threat, had a weapon in their hand, a gun, and was still able to be taken into custody alive. So what justifies a police officer firing 6, 7, 8, sometimes 43 shots into someone? What justifies that? Does anything justify that course of action? Does anything justify an officer even drawing a gun on a suspect, a bystander, anything? Because we know bullets don't have names. What if that officer missed their target? Then what? That's happened before, where a stray bullet has hit an innocent bystander. So what justifies that in your mind? Does anything? We must remember, for the most part, the law is that you are innocent until proven guilty. So then why is it necessary for a police officer to take matters into their own hands and decide then and there that you are just guilty? And guilty of execution at that. For Jake Blake, he was able to survive the shooting, which, if you saw the video, is a miracle within itself, but he survived. His life will forever be altered. So what justified that? Walking away in front of his 3 sons on allegedly his son's birthday. What justified it? It seems that there is something that's gone awry here, whether it is the training of certain officers or just how we deal with certain situations. Maybe it's the mental headspace they were in. Something in this system is broken. There's something that's gone wrong, that it seems justifiable for anyone to react in that way. So maybe that's what we need to start looking at. Don't focus on how people should be seeking their justice, what it is they're doing to seek justice. Focus on the reason why they're asking for justice to be served. Why are people still protesting for Breonna Taylor? Because they felt that there was an injustice that occurred that led to her death. And they feel that no one is paying attention to that. And that's why they're still out in the streets. That's why they are having sit-ins in front of the mayor's home. That's why people are still out there saying justice for Breonna Taylor. That is why her mother is still having these interviews, sharing the life that was Breonna Taylor's, the person who was Breonna Taylor, the human life that was taken. That's also why LaTetra Whitman stood in front of people and addressed them, saying that she hasn't cried for years, because this isn't anything new. In the 30 years she's been alive, she has seen this happen. As a Black history minor, she's read about these stories, researched them. This isn't about crying anymore. This is about listening and changing. Because as she said, she's angry and she's tired. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who are angry and tired, that there's another video out there, that there's another name that we need to remember and to seek justice for. So again, I ask you, what justifies what happened to Jacob Blake? What justifies what happened to Breonna Taylor? And who has the power? Who has the power to make these kind of decisions? It seems that we're constantly skirting around what the actual problem is here. And the problem is the police officers think that it's okay to just shoot people when they are trained to be able to detain folks. I'll leave you with that for today. Just something we should be thinking about how we ourselves may be contributing to these conversations as well, that may not be leading towards the change we need to be. This is a time for all of us to honestly be open and honest about how we feel, what we think. And yes, opinions may differ, but fundamentally, it should be the same, that a police officer's first response should not be to kill and ask questions later. So that concludes our show for today. And as always, it was so nice chatting with you. And I appreciate you allowing for this conversations to continue to occur and having these conversations as well wherever you are. Is it's important that we keep talking about these things, keep talking about what change needs to occur, keep talking about why change needs to occur. But with that, you can keep up with the GBKM network in various ways. You can listen live 24/7 at www.gbkm.fm. You can watch live, like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff on Facebook and YouTube at GBKM TV. You can follow us on Instagram at GBKM FM and Twitter at GBKM_FM. And you can follow me, your host, Elizabeth Eloidy, at TIS_Liz_O on Facebook, on Instagram and Twitter, And with that, I will leave you. I will see you at the same time, same place next week. It was great chatting with you.
Do you know who you are? What is your name?
Sometimes you wonder why and wonder how. Don't be alarmed. Just stay calm, cause even if you choose or not to.
My child, recite the words of this ancient mythology. The wisdom I disperse in this verse, no apology. Memorize to keep you from evil theology. For you, the darker hue, you denied your equality. See, for generations we perpetrated psychology. Divide and conquer each other, really lynch policy. You cannot build each other up, how will you build economy?